You ever walk through a park and assume the worst thing waiting for you is silence? Maybe the dark? That's what people thought about Bitsevsky Park. But for years, someone was there, playing a quiet, terrifying game. His name was Alexander Pichushkin. And here's the chilling part. He didn't just want to kill. He had a goal. 64 victims, one for every square on a chessboard. Think about that for a second. A man walking through the same park as everyone else, shaking hands, sharing drinks, even making small talk. Then later, back home, he'd sit down and mark another square on his chessboard. Slow, patient, methodical. And the scariest part? For years, almost no one realized a monster was quietly finishing a game no one else even knew was being played. This is the disturbing true story of the man they later called the chessboard killer. Before we continue, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Okay, let's proceed. Before we go any further, I want to pause for a second. What you're about to hear is a real case. Real people, real lives lost. This story centers on Alexander Pichushkin, a serial killer who operated mainly in Bitsevsky Park in Moscow during the 1990s and early 2000s. Investigators say the killings stretched for years, with his arrest finally coming in 2006. Now, I want to be clear about something. This video discusses a real criminal case for educational and documentary purposes. The goal isn't shock, and it's definitely not entertainment at the expense of victims. Think about it this way. When we talk about cases like this, we're not just talking about a killer. We're talking about the people who crossed his path. Families who never expected a normal day to turn into the worst call of their lives. So as we go through this story, the focus stays where it should be. On the truth, on the victims, and on understanding how something like this could happen in the first place. Before the crimes that would later shock Russia, the life of Alexander Pichushkin looked surprisingly ordinary. He was born in 1974 in Mytishi and grew up in nearby Moscow. His parents separated when he was young, so much of his early life was shaped by his mother and especially his grandfather, who became the most stable figure in his childhood. The two spent a lot of time together. They walked around the neighborhood, talked about everyday things, and often played chess. For him, chess wasn't just a game. It was something calm and structured in a world that sometimes felt confusing. As a child, he suffered a serious head injury after falling from a swing. After that accident, people around him noticed changes. Learning became harder, and communication wasn't always easy. Because of those struggles, he later attended a boarding school for children with learning difficulties. His life there followed a strict routine. Classes during the day, quiet evenings, and a structured environment designed to help students keep up. Outside school, life in Moscow moved at its normal rhythm. Apartment blocks full of families, crowded buses in the morning, and people looking for a little peace after work. Many residents spent their free time in places like Bitsevsky Park, a large green park where people walked, relaxed, and talked with friends. It was a common gathering place for locals of all ages. As he got older, his life remained relatively simple. He worked ordinary jobs, including factory work, and followed a predictable routine like many others in the city. Wake up, go to work, come home. Nothing about his daily life suggested he would later become one of the most notorious criminals in Russian history. The people who would later become victims were ordinary residents of Moscow as well. Many were elderly individuals, neighbors, and people who simply visited the park to relax or socialize. They were the kind of people you see every day in a city. Parents, grandparents, workers, and retirees going about normal routines. In other words, before the investigation, before the headlines, and before fear spread through the community, everything looked normal on the surface. A quiet man living an ordinary life in Moscow, surrounded by ordinary people. And that quiet normalcy is what makes the story of Alexander Pichushkin so unsettling. Because nothing about those early years clearly warned the world about what would eventually unfold in Bitsevsky Park. And this is where it gets heavy. Not dramatic, just real. He didn't move fast at first. He blended in, lived a normal life on the surface in Moscow. But over time, authorities say he began targeting people who were easy to approach and unlikely to raise immediate alarm. Usually older men, sometimes people dealing with alcohol struggles, people who wouldn't expect danger from a casual conversation. Here's what I mean. He would meet them in public spaces, talk for a while, gain a bit of trust. Then he'd invite them for a drink, often to a quiet area inside Bitsevsky Park. Nothing about it would seem unusual at first. At some point during these meetings, authorities say a violent crime occurred. The pattern repeated, again and again, over years. Investigators later said he used similar methods each time. He isolated the person, then carried out the attack in a way that left little immediate evidence. In several cases, victims were later found in secluded parts of the park or in nearby utility structures, which made the crimes harder to connect early on. Think about it this way. This wasn't random chaos. It was routine, planned, repeated, almost methodical. And there's something else that makes this case even harder to process. He kept track. According to his own statements, he was trying to reach a specific number, 64, one for every square on a chessboard. Authorities later found evidence that supported this idea, including markings that appeared to correspond to victims. By the time police closed in, dozens of people had disappeared or been found dead in similar circumstances. For a long time, it didn't fully connect. Different victims, different moments, same place. It finally started to come together in 2006. A woman who planned to meet him told someone where she was going. That small detail changed everything. When she didn't return, investigators had something concrete to follow. They traced the last known contact. It led back to him. From there, the case unraveled quickly. He was arrested and questioned. And during the investigation, authorities linked him to a large number of killings across more than a decade. Many centered around that same park, same pattern, same approach. No theatrics, no mystery persona, just repetition, patience, and time. And honestly, that's what makes it disturbing. Not just what he did, but how long he was able to keep doing it without being stopped. What stays with me about Alexander Pichushkin isn't just the number, it's the pattern, the time, the fact that something this calculated can exist so quietly in plain sight. And I think that's the real takeaway here. Evil doesn't always look loud or obvious. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it blends in. And that's exactly why it matters that these stories are told, clearly, honestly, and without looking away. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.